Hello, everyone. How are you? It is so good to be with you today. I hope that you've had an absolutely wonderful day, but it's about to get better. I wonder if you could type in the chat box if you can see and hear me properly, and also where you are listening from tonight. If you do suffer any problems with audio or video, remember that the webinar is being recorded, so you can watch it later on YouTube. If you do have any sound problems, it might be your internet connection. So the best thing to do is to leave the webinar room and come back in. So let's see. Hi, Leona. Good to see you again. Hi, Encarnação. I've seen Pedro and Filomena are with us today as well. So a big hug to you all. It's really, really good to see friends. Eva, thank you so much for telling me that you can hear me. It's always a worry that you might not be able to. Hi, Talvina, how are you? Great to see you online, even if it's just virtually. So today's webinar has been dedicated to promoting strategies that help students develop their study skills and actually take charge of their learning. In other words, what we're speaking about is how we can implement the Perfil do Aluno to promote autonomy for learning. Hi, Anna. Thanks for joining us. Now, today's webinar is a short webinar because I know you have to go and cook dinner for your family. And so I'd like to finish this in about 3/4 of an hour. And the idea would be to go through three main objectives. So our first objective is going to be to discuss how we can form autonomous learners. We will then move on to the second part of the webinar, and I'll invite you to try out a few practical activities and to experience a few resources which we've prepared just for you. And finally, we'll close off the webinar with any doubts that you have. Now, Sal is saying that she actually has many papers to correct. Sal, don't worry about that now. You can do it later on. Just enjoy being with the teacher friends at the moment. Right, so hi to Isabel, right? Hi, Lena from Foundation. Nice to see you. Right, are we ready to get started? Can you type in the chat box ready and I'll know that we can begin. So glad to see that you're taking it easy for this, for this hour or so. Hi, Ligia. Right, so it looks like we can begin. Now, the first thing that I'd like to ask you is to sort of take a trip down memory lane and go back to that place when you were in the language classroom as a student. What did you do to study English? Can you type in the chat box? Remember back in the day, we actually did study a wee bit more than our students do nowadays. So what kind of things did you do to study and get good marks in the test? Let's see who the first comment is going to be from. Is it going to be from you, Filomena, or from you, Telma? Think back. What did you do to study English? Did you do lots of exercises or study grammar? Telma says that she would listen to a lot of music. Annabella, a good student, would practice a lot. Carla's saying the secret was reading, reading, reading. Louise is defending that the secret is learning vocabulary. And Katerina would just enjoy life and relax and watch a few good books. Oh, Carla worked hard. She'd write lots of sentences, right? And I see that there are a few of us who also worked with the workbook, right? Oh, Elena did loads of things. She would listen to music, watch TV, and practice with songs. And I don't believe this, Sal. You would write down all the lyrics and watch lots of programs on BBC. Katia knew the secret was friends, and so she would have pen friends. So these were all wonderful strategies that we used back in the day to get us to use our English and to motivate us to continue doing so. The problem is that our students are just a bookadingo different to us, right? I doubt that if we ask them the same questions, they type in the same answers. Don't you agree? Some of them are so lost when it comes to learning the language that they really don't know when to begin. And I'm sure that you've had the problem of a student tell you that they've studied hard for the test, but then the test day comes and they don't get an awfully good mark. And when you ask them what they've done, then they tell you that they've read through the explanation once or twice if you're lucky. Right. So as Sal is saying, they're a bookadinga lazy or distracted with all the other things that are going on in their life. Right. So what we would like to do is to think about how we can pull them back in to studying English. And the experts who do a lot of research in this area tell us that the secret is really to activate prior knowledge. In other words, we need to tap in to what our students already know, and we need to relate the new information that we want to teach them to the old information that they already know. In other words, learners aren't blank slates. We have previous learning experiences which need to be activated if we want learning to be memorable and to stick in our brains. So it seems that the first step to developing autonomy in our students is to make them aware of their learning. And I would divide this into two different battles that we need to fight. On the one hand, we need to prepare them for the new learning that is about to happen. But then on the other hand, we need to follow a spiral approach to learning in which we're going back and recycling that previous learning and building on from that, right? Yeah, and oh, in Kadnasan we're saying that nowadays the kids are lost in their mobile phones. I'd have to agree. But is that necessarily a bad thing? Well, we'll have a look in this webinar. Right, now, how are we going to encourage students to do this? Well, you know what they say, when in times of trouble, you can always rely on a friend. And in our classrooms, that would be the course book. Now, if you take a closer look at the course book, you'll see that on the side, we have a little tab with the learning objectives. And I've zoomed that up for you so you can see that on the screen below the magnifying glass. Now, let me just check that all my wonderful students and dear colleagues are doing well at home. So can I ask you to have a look at this tab and to type in what the topic of this unit is? So let's imagine that we're about to start a new unit in class and we'd like to raise awareness to that, right? Can you have a look at this little banner and see what the topic of this unit is? Vina, don't worry, you're not late. I'm sure that you're on time in some time zone, so don't fret over it. Oh, Fatima and Carla and Alexandra are really good students, and so are you, Katerina. So the topic is food. Well done. Now, I have a question that I'm curious about. Can you type in what your favorite food on the planet is? And it could be something for that dentinho doce, right? So let's see, what food do you absolutely adore eating? Now, as I ask this, the students are starting to activate vocabulary that they know about this topic, right? And stronger students will have a lot of vocabulary floating in their mind. Weaker students might just know one or two words, but still we are activating this and building on from previous learning. So, oh, I see that this is like a buffet of food because Encarnação likes seafood. And so does Anna. Filomena is like me. She likes cheesecake. Elizabeth has an healthy option with fish. Melon, I see. Graça likes cheese. Teresa likes patata, right? Skewers. And Vina likes, oh, lots of things, fruit and bread and orange juice. Right, now, if you have a look at our little banda, you'll see that we're also going to be learning some new adjectives to describe food. But I wonder if you already know one or two. So can you go back to your favorite food and type in the chat box one or two adjectives to describe it? So what might it taste like? What might it smell like? What might it feel like in your mouth? Or perhaps what might it look like, Paula? What does that cozido look like, right? Can you type in the chat box one or two adjectives to describe your food? Oh, so we have delicious, we have fresh and sweet. Yummy seems to be a favorite one. Sandra is saying salty and spicy. So once again, we're going back to build on the students' vocabulary. And now I'm ready to bridge them into the target grammar. And I would ask them, does anybody remember what countable and uncountable nouns are? What's the difference? Or perhaps you might remember what containers are. Now, I need a little bit of help because I had a cheese sandwich for lunch. And you know what they say about cheese? It makes you forget everything. So I wonder if you can help. Paola's got quite a nice long list of adjectives. She says that her favorite food is tasty and delicious. Now, what were my questions again? Does anybody know what the difference between countable and uncountable nouns are? Or you can choose to type in the chat box if you can remember any container. Right, so Sal is telling us that cheese is uncountable, and I think that she's right? Peter's also saying that cheese is uncountable, so well done there. But Sandra is explaining that, guess what? Oranges are countable. Hi, Elise. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Right. Oh, Carla can remember one of those containers. She said a bowl, and Elena's on fire. Look at all those containers that she's got, right? So Delphine is saying that lemons are countable, and Teresa remembers that containers are cans. So what we really are doing is tapping into what students already know. And as you see other students' comments, it helps you remember what you can remember about the last year. That is, if your holiday hasn't reprogrammed your mind, you know what happens in September after the holiday, right? It's as if some little demon has pressed Control Alt Delete in our students' brains, and they kind of tend to forget everything that we've taught them. Right now, once we've done this, we can start to understand what Dornier means by developing the student's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And what we've been doing is developing that extrinsic motivation, showing them what they are able to do in class, perhaps as a part of the class. So they might not be able to do it individually, but we're creating that kind of climate where they feel that they can, right? Sandra, have you just started this unit? Well, guess what? So have I. That's why I chose it today. Now, the secret is going to be to maintain that motivation. Because if we only rely on extrinsic motivation and the teacher, if for some reason the teacher doesn't do what we want her to do, then we might become demotivated. So it's important that we also sort of feed and nurture our students' interior motivation. Carla, I see that you have students like mine. Last year's teacher didn't mention it. The problem is that many times I'm last year's teacher, if you know what I mean, right? Now, how are we going to develop this intrinsic motivation? Well, the secret is going to be to personalize learning. And there are lots of fantastic resources that we can use. I love to use a KWL chart. So you can see it on the screen. The first column is dedicated to what the students already know. The second one is dedicated to their curiosity, what they want to know, so that I can try to include these things in my lesson. And the last L column is dedicated to the end of the unit to come back and do a sort of a self-evaluation and find out what we've learned together. Right. So Carla says that she knows exactly what I mean. All right. So does Nunu. Yeah. Now, I would never ask students to fill this in without giving them an example because our stronger students are perfectly fine and autonomous. But our weaker students tend to need a little ajudinha just to activate their minds. So as I present the KWL chart to them, I'd also present examples. So these are my examples. I think meat is healthy food, especially if it is chicken or turkey. You know what they say about red meat, only once a week. Now, unhealthy food might be these hamburgers that taste wonderful, but then are not that great. Too many carbs, right? An adjective that I can remember to describe the chips I eat with my hamburgers is salty, right? And I remember a container, a tin of tuna, right? You know, now on Fridays we can't eat any meat, so I usually have a tin of tuna with some rice. Now, oh, Sal is a wonderful student because she's already started filling in her KWL chart in the chat box. And that's right, veggies are healthy as well, right? Hi, Anna. Thanks for joining us. So as students are starting to activate this, they can actually see the things they already know, even though we haven't even started learning yet. Now, once we've done this, then we're ready to move on to step 2, and we're ready to start to develop students' autonomy. Now, I would like to invite you to be my students today. Do you trust me enough to be your teacher? Can you type in a yes in the chat box if you do? Now, if you do accept to be my students today, can you do me an awfully big favor and divide your brain into 2? Can half of your brain be the student in your class and experience the activity as they would? But the other half of your brain is the teacher in you, always thinking about, will this work with my students or do I need to give it a tweak? And it's great to see that you trust me to be your teacher. Thank you for that. So we're going to start learning, and I'm going to be working on helping you understand the new content so that then you can work on it and consolidate it. In other words, move it from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. So let's imagine that we're going to start off with this unit. Can you see the yellow words on the screen? Right? Do you see those highlighted yellow words? Well, I'd like to ask you to type in one or two in the chat box. Let's see if you can find them. All right. So have a look at those yellow words that have been highlighted. Can you find one or two for me? And are you able to read them? Now, luckily in the classroom, the students have their course books, so they're able to see these in a little bit of a bigger size, right? Today's screen is a little small, I do realize, but perhaps you have supersonic, wonderful eyesight and you can see this. Right, Philomena's saying, Patty, she's got really good eyesight. Really impressed with you. Hi, Daniela. Paul has been able to see meatloaf. That's right. Oh, some more meatloaf. Now, I'm not sure who's speaking to us from Funchal, but a big hello to you there. Oh, calzone, Katia can see. Yogurt, Margarita saying. Katerina can't. Don't worry. You can always open your student's book on page 74 and then you'll be able to see it. Now, once the students can see these words and become aware of them, I tell them that they have an amazing resource that they can use when their memories get a little lazy. It's almost as cool as Google. All they need to do is to go to the study guide in the back of the student's book, and then in the study guide, they'll find the bilingual dictionary. And so they can look up any of these yellow words, which might be just a little danoninho too difficult for them. Now, the dictionary that we've chosen is a bilingual dictionary because I think you'll agree with me that students in the 8th year still need a little bit of support. Perhaps in the 10th year, they can already use monolingual dictionary. So, hi, Sana from Fushal. Glad to have you with us. Now, as they're doing this, they're starting to look up words for themselves. In other words, they're not asking me to be their walking dictionary. You know, when they put up their hand saying, teacher, teacher, what's this? And get really frustrated when you don't go and help them immediately. On the other hand, research also tells us that when you use your senses, and in this case, you're going to have to use your hands to flip over and find the right page in the dictionary, your memory tends to remember this better. You'll also notice that we provide the phonemic transcription because if you say the word out loud as you're reading the entry, then you remember even better, right? So this is a nice way to start making students autonomous, but in a scaffolded way. So they're not looking through a big dictionary where they can get lost. They're looking through a smaller dictionary that's been made just for them with the target words that they need to understand. So my question is, do you think that you could do this with your students to start making them aware of their learning and slowly start taking baby steps to develop their autonomy? Can you type in the chat box if you think that you can? Isabel, all these yellow words are in the book, so they're the more difficult words, right? All the other words are either in the word boxes or they're the target vocabulary that we're teaching them in the unit. But these words are those words that we're preparing for our strongest students who go to the institute or who watch a lot of TV or perhaps interact a lot on social media or play video games online and already know that core vocabulary. So there's a little something here to take them a little further, but we don't want to lose the other students that are a little behind. And so we're giving them the dictionary. All right. Teresa's saying, finally she can chat. Nice to have you with us, Terezinha. Right, now once we've done this, then I'm going to move on to making students my grammar detectives. So, congratulations! You've just been promoted to Grammar Detective of the Day. Now, I'd like you to help me find the answers to three existentialistic doubts that I have. And to help you do that, I'm going to give you access to my doubts. So, doubt number one, I wonder if you could look at this material that I'm going to give you, these secret grammar photos, and I wonder if you could count how many containers there are. So the answer to this question would be a number. Are there 5, 10, 15? Who knows? Perhaps even more. Then I'd like you to help me decide if containers can be countable. So I remember that cheese is uncountable and that oranges are countable, but what about containers? Are they countable? So can I count these tins and all these other things? And finally, you know how much I love chocolate, don't you? So, what kind of containers could we use to speak about chocolate, right? Can you reread the questions so they're active in your mind? And when you're ready to look at all the pistas, can you type ready in the chat box? Remember, containers to speak about chocolate that I love. All right. Oh, Elena also loves chocolate. In fact, she's speaking about bars of chocolate. Now, these wonderful students don't need any scaffolding to answer my questions, but in the classroom, I would give them access to two resources: our best friend in the classroom, the course book, and I'd ask the students to open up on the grammar page and to have a look at the grammar. Now, remember that the grammar page is always designed in English because we know that you are there in the classroom to help students with anything they find difficult. But in the study guide, they have the grammar explanations, which I've got on the side of the screen on the white page. And here you'll notice that we're always going to explain the grammar in Portuguese so that our weaker students have a little bit of an ajudinha to understand the grammar. We've also designed the study guide so that they can open the grammar pages and have the study guide open at the same time. And so, like you, they would also be able to see all three pages. Now, this chat box is on fire. You've all got the right answers. But I wonder if you could count how many containers there are. So let's have a look. In the student's book, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 3. So there are, that's right, 15. But what about in the study guide? Do we also have 15? Sandra and Sal, you've beat me to it. So there are, in fact, 20 different containers that we can use to speak about our favorite food. Now, question number 2. Are containers countable? So, does that mean that we can say 1 tin of tuna, 2 tins of tuna, 3 tins of tuna? Yeah, you would be right. And again, you'll see that they have that explanation at the bottom of the study guide, right? Then, last question of the day. Which containers can I use to speak about my favorite food, chocolate? And I've already seen you typing in the chat box that we can speak about boxes of chocolate, packets of chocolate, bars of chocolate. So do you see, rather than explain everything to the students, I'm asking them to have a look and discover easy things for themselves. And these become easier because of the Portuguese explanations in the study guide. Without that, our weaker students might have some serious problems understanding. Grazie, you're right. We could also say a packet of chocolate. Now, once we've done this, we're ready to move on to step 3. And this implies helping students organize learning so that they can actually study. Now, there are two ways that we can go about this. The first way that we can start is by Googling lots of study time videos on YouTube. And I've got 4 on the screen. There are loads. Now, these videos are fantastic, but they are quite complicated. So I wonder whether they are the way to go with our more challenged students who really need our help to become a little bit more autonomous. I wonder whether these beautiful, colorful notes that you see on the screen are in fact doable for them. What do you think? Would you like to type your answer in the chat box? I mean, these notes are gorgeous with all these different color pens, right? And little boxes and pictures. But would the weaker students be able to do this? Or might this be just a little too difficult for them? And so it would frighten them away. Now, I have to agree with Graça saying that they are not used to taking down notes. So before they'd be ready for something like this, I think they need a middle step which shows them the benefits of note taking. And luckily, again, our best friend in the classroom, the student's book, has prepared a little bit of help. On the left, you can see the My Notes section with the red pen. And this has been divided into 2 different areas. Firstly, we have the vocabulary where we give them the English word, and what they need to do is translate it into their mother language so that they can consolidate that vocabulary and check if there's any word that they only know mais ou menos and need to go back before the test so that when the test comes, they'll be A for okay. The bottom section has the most important grammar rules, not all those tiny little rules that they can check on the grammar pages or in the back of the book in the study guide. But these are those essential rules that they would need to be able to get a 3 in the test. Now, all the students need to do is complete these notes. And again, for stronger students, you know as well as I do that this is relatively easy. The problem is going to be the weaker students. Now, Teresa has raised an important point, which is we've always been careful to include a few words which are very similar or even the same in both languages, so that even our weaker students will get something right and feel like they are learning some English. So as Carolina is saying, what we're doing is we're starting with something that's very simple, showing them that they can rather than telling them that they can. Now, this is all good and well for stronger students, but weaker students might need a tutor to help them study at home. And luckily, the Ministry of Education hasn't remembered that we should go home and study with them yet. Now, we know that they like studying on phones with anything that's digital. So this is why we've prepared a very short study time tutorial video that they can watch again and again to complete these notes. It really is very simple. Have a look and see what I mean. Think back to the page and think if it would, in fact, help your students complete their notes so they could study for the test. Here goes. Luckily, Teresa is saying,
Study notes in less than 3 minutes. Ready for a quick vocabulary recap? Here goes. Let's translate some words and expressions related to ordering food.
Pedir comida,
Starters, appetizers.
entradas,
Main course,
prato principal,
dessert.
sobremesa,
A scoop of ice cream.
uma bola de gelado,
To pay in cash, by card.
pagar em dinheiro com cartão,
Bill,
conta,
change.
troco,
Receipt.
recibo.
Now,
And now for
let's
the
revise
second
some
part.
grammar. A countable noun is a noun that can be singular or plural. This orange is very sweet. These oranges are very sweet. An uncountable noun is a noun that can only be singular. This soup is hot. Broccoli is my favorite vegetable. We use containers with countable nouns. A packet of biscuits, 2 packets of biscuits. And with uncountable nouns, this loaf of bread, those loaves of bread. Notice this sentence. Those loaves of bread smell so good. When the container is in the plural form, the verb is also used in the plural form. And that's a wrap. Good luck for the test.
Right, so short, sweet, and to the point. And I'm so happy to see your comments in the chat box and that you think your students would benefit from these. So do you see what I mean by developing their autonomy skills in a very scaffolded way? We give them the challenge, but then we give them the support so that they can meet that challenge. Now, you know the saying, practice makes perfect. And there are some things that we will only learn and get right in the language if we practice. And so that's why right next to the study time pages with the study notes for them to study, we have included a pop quiz. Now, if you have a look, you'll see that the pop quiz is graded. In other words, exercise 1 is easier than exercise 2. And exercise 2, surprise, surprise, is easier than exercise 3. So we're slowly building up the students' confidence. And if they get lost, all they have to do is go back to their study notes. And if they get confused, then all they have to do is check the explanation in Portuguese in the study guide. So a very nice and scaffolded way for them to be able to see if they are ready for the test or not. And that brings me to our second last step, making sure that the students have the confidence that they need to face the test with the right attitude. You know what they say, the energy that you send out to the universe is the energy you'll get back. So if you start thinking, I can't do this, chances are that you won't be able to do it. But if you believe in yourself and you focus on what you can do rather than what you can't, there's a big chance that you'll do well in the test. Now, for some students, the only way that they will do well is if we give them a practice test that mirrors the test in the Capinha that we teachers have access to. So this is why we end off the unit with a complete practice test with listening, reading, use of English, and writing, and the same exercise types that they'll have in the test, so that there aren't any nasty surprises. And we teachers get to catch them at being good when it counts, if you know what I mean, right? Now, it is important that the students do the test, but for them to develop their autonomy, they need to go one step further and self-evaluate their progress. In other words, has the studying that I've done paid off, or do I need to go back to the language gym and work out a little more? And for that reason, you'll see that the practice test ends off with a self-evaluation rubric and a table for the students to do. All right. Oh, I see lots of students in the chat box typing that now they can. Right. So let me zoom that up for you so you can see that a little better. You'll see that the first column has all the conteúdos that will be in the test. So you know when they always ask to, oh dear, I'm so excited that I even get caught up in my own speech. You know when the kids come to us and ask us to tell them o que sai no teste, right? That would be this first column. Notice that we give them the concrete pages that they need to study in the student's book so they don't get lost. The second column transforms them into little teachers. So in the practice test, they count the things they got right and the things that they need to go back to. And then they can see if I've got 5 right and 2 wrong, I'm okay. But if I've got 2 right and 5 wrong, perhaps I need to go back and study, right? And now, Graça, my favorite part of the table is the advice to improve. We're not going to tell them something general like, you need to study more. Instead, we're going to say, if you didn't get that vocabulary right, then have a look at this advice. Make word cards. On the one side, write the word in English. On the other side, write the word in Portuguese. Flip them over, read through them. Then see if you can remember. Start with the English word and try to remember the Portuguese, and then swap it over. When you can remember them all, you're ready for the test. And I think that this kind of advice is particularly useful for our weaker students who also, like you, Isabel, might never have noticed that this is the way that you study English. So the objective here is not telling them that they can be good at English, but rather showing them what the path is to success, right? So yes, Katja, this would replace giving them that matrix for the text that is done for teachers rather than for students. This is way more practical and it shows them what they need to do to get it right. So at this point, the students should be ready for the big day, and they should be ready for that test that we've prepared to catch them at being good. Now, just in case you have a student or two who's a little bit slower, or sometimes those classes that need a little bit more help, then in the teacher's file, you'll see lots of different worksheets in the capinha that we've prepared for you. I remind you that these are the standard worksheets, but we also have the Ensino Inclusivo section where we've adapted these worksheets down for weaker students to make sure that every single student in our classroom is being engaged to study English at the level that they feel comfortable with. And as they start to see that they can, they move on to progressing to worksheets that need less support. So time is almost up. I said 7, so you could go and prepare dinner for everyone, or perhaps just have a break at the end of a long day of work. So I wonder if you could type in the chat box whether we've met the objective. Our first objective in today's webinar was to discuss how we could make learners more autonomous, right? So could you please type in the chat box if you think that we've done that objective? Katya, I'm really pleased to see that you like our engaging materials, and I hope that it's made your students discover the love for the language. Oh, Elena's saying yes, so that's a thumbs up. Christina has validated. So let's move on to our second objective. Did we get to try out a few practical activities? Remember the study time video that we watched, right? Oh, Carla's saying definitely engaging. Pedro is saying first objective bingo, right? And Fatima and Italvina have just confirmed that we've done objective 2. So that means that the time has come for me to ask you whether there are any questions that you might have. And if there are, please could you type them in the chat box and I'd be more than happy to discuss them with you. Let me keep an eye out on this chat box because it's flying with comments, right? Goretti is also saying that we've done that. Natercia, good to see you and good to have a thumbs up. Anna's also convinced that we've been working very hard. So you definitely deserve the end of the day. Right, it seems that there aren't many doubts, but we'll wait a minute or two. Now, while we're waiting, I'd personally like to invite you to come to the Encontros. It's almost that time of the year where we get to show you the new baby. Yeah, Engaging 9 is hot off the press. And yes, it has everything that you are expecting. But this year, we have one novelty that is going to make your eyes smile with joy and your heart pound with happiness. I'd love to tell you what it is, but they'd kill me here at the Editora if I did. So please, I would invite you to come and see for yourself this amazing, exciting new resource. And who knows, have a cafezinho with me too. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you. Before we go, I'd like to have a look at Margarita's question. And Margarita's asking whether I think that books will be digital. Margarita, I'm not sure that this measure will be next year, right? But I do think that this measure is in the pipelines. So sooner or later, we will have to go into more of a digital approach to learning. I think, though, that we're still at that moment where a hybrid approach is better for our students. So a few digital resources like the ones I've shown you today, but also some paper-based learning. But as we see these new generations that really grow up with technology, I mean, I went out to have dinner the other day and I saw this couple with this little baby who couldn't have been more than a year old. And he already had a mobile phone with a YouTube video in his hands, right? So this kind of generation of learners, I believe, will learn effectively with digital support. So I do think that that is in the pipelines. I'm not quite sure whether this will take off next year, but if not next year, then perhaps in 2 or 3 years' time. Right. So I don't see any more questions, which means that you know what I'm going to say next, don't you? Glory, glory. This is the end of today's story, but the beginning of our next meeting together. Remember that you can enroll online for the Encontros or you can speak to your consultor who will happily do that for you. Thank you so much for having come. Have a wonderful end of the afternoon, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.